This is Rob Talbot for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted to be joined by the WBO Super Featherweight Champion of the World, Jamel Herring. How are you, Jamel?
I'm doing great. Nice to be on. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming. How's lockdown been for you?
Lockdown has been something else. It's a whole new experience, especially when you have to not only play parent but teacher as well. But for the most part, I've been making the most of it. I'm keeping my head up high, and I'm just enjoying the time with the family overall.
How is that for fighters? Obviously, when you go into camp, it's very much isolation a lot of the time. You've now got you're isolated, but in a completely different way. You're at home. How has that been?
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's crazy. I would have been in camp as we speak right now, somewhere in the mountains, but for the most part, just I got to spend a lot of time to bond with the family. We've actually been having a blast indoors, so we've been having a great time. So I'm just making the most of it because once things go back to normal, I'll be back out there on the road and on the grind, like crazy. So right now I'm just gonna enjoy it and just make the most of things.
I think that's what I'm trying to do as well, because obviously I work in boxing, so I travel around a lot. I'm often going to America or traveling around the UK, so it's nice to sometimes have that bit of time at home.
Yeah, you take it as you gotta take the negative and turn it to a positive. I take it as I'm just letting my body rest. I'm spending the time where it counts the most, obviously. And, just taking it one day at a time.
You said you've been playing teacher as well as parent. What have you been teaching?
Like this one who just came in. Like I said, for my daughter, I've been doing social studies. I'm just trying to use my math techniques that I learned from when I was a kid, and it's crazy. I find myself sometimes learning things over again with my children, but it's definitely been a fun experience overall. But at times it can get crazy because, as you know, sometimes your kids don't know the difference between school and vacation. They think because they're home on vacation, so that I have to like separate the two from with them.
What would you have been like when you were a kid if you had been forced to stay inside?
I'd probably be doing the same thing they're doing. Especially me being a gamer, I'd have been crazy hours throughout the day on Nintendo 64 and things like that, and the PlayStation. So I'd probably been having a blast myself. Because you got to also think, when we were younger, there wasn't much out, like there wasn't like the iPads and the devices. So we always found fun of things that we had indoors, or we had the neighborhood friends from around, whatever. But it's definitely a different ball game in today's world. It's because so much stuff available to kids these days that's out there.
What games did you used to play?
Oh, me, I was big. I think I was big like as young. I was big on like Sega. Like so, I was big on like the Sonics and the Mortal Kombats and things of that era. That was me.
I used to play Streets of Rage when I was younger. Do you remember that?
Which one?
Streets of Rage. That was classic game.
That was definitely the kind of a good beat 'em up on court, and then it came to the Spider-Man Maximum Carnage. That was another beat 'em up and things of that nature. But yeah, I was around the Earthworm Jim games and stuff like that.
Okay, right, enough talking about gaming. What I actually want to talk to you about today, I've been around you quite a lot. I've never actually interviewed you. Whenever I've been around you, I've been with a colleague who's always interviewed you. I've always wanted to speak to you about your military background. I know that's something that you proudly talk about and have done. Tell me a little bit about going into the military. I'm always fascinated by people's reasons for doing so.
Yeah, for sure. My reason was the 9/11 attacks in New York on the World Trade Center. That was my reasoning because I'm from New York, of course, so that was close to home. I've had friends that lost family during that attack. So that was basically my main reason for going. And also I had a best friend who was a year older than me at the time, so he went into the Marine Corps before I did. And, when he came from boot camp, he basically was telling me how much he learned and his experience. So that basically helped me make the decision a lot more, but it's definitely because of the attacks we suffered back in 2001.
How old were you?
I think when I joined, I was still 17 years old. Back in 03, I joined like right after high school. I graduated. My birthday's in October, so my birthday's late in the year. So when I graduated, I was still 17, and then like right after that, I went into boot camp, and I had my 18th birthday in boot camp. So that was a crazy experience right there. But I will never forget it.
What did your family say when you told them you wanted to be a Marine?
My family was actually they were actually for it. They were actually they weren't against it because my father he was in the army when he was younger, and most of my aunts and uncles were in the army as well. And plus, to look at it as it was keeping me out of trouble. I wasn't going to stay in New York to get in trouble and stay in the streets. So that definitely thank you, boo boo. That definitely they were definitely behind that, especially if I wasn't going to go to college. They definitely suggested that I could go to the military anyway.
Were you somebody who got into trouble when you were younger? You were a very charming, seemingly very nice guy.
No, I actually wasn't. But the thing was, I had friends that were into trouble. So of course, your parents don't want you around that certain influence because you may pick up those troubles as well as you go along. So they were like the sooner I got out of New York, the better. So but yeah, for me, my thing was I was always into sports, of course, or I tried, like I said, I had like video games and like technology. That was my way of just staying out of trouble. Was sports and technology is always my biggest thing. Even now, of course, sports is my lifestyle now. But when I'm home, I'm usually doing things with technology or I'm still gaming. So I haven't really changed much since I was a kid. But I definitely would say that my parents put me on the right thing, kept me on the right path, and if I didn't listen to them, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today.
What was your earliest memory of boot camp?
Oh man, just the grueling. I think I will never forget the first day getting off that bus and getting there, and just like in an instance, people just screaming in your face. So it was a whole I've never been through it. Especially like I'm still a kid myself. I'm 17 years old. I'm like it's just like a whole different culture shock. So I definitely that was my definitely my early experience, but I never forget. And then they had me like in the sand pit doing sit-ups and push-ups on my birthday as my birthday present. So I'll never forget that.
So that was your birthday present.
That was my birthday present. Couldn't have cake. Definitely couldn't have cake. So I got to get. They put me in shape.
How quickly do you have to adjust to a lifestyle like that? Obviously, somebody like me, I look at it, the only experience I really have personally, well, the only experience I have personally is what I see in the movies and on the TV. How quickly do you have to adjust to that, and how quickly did you do it?
You definitely have to adjust real quick because if you don't, you'll easily fall behind, and you do not want to fall behind on things, especially in that lifestyle. So you definitely have to be a quick thinker and a quick learner more. But you more importantly, you have to learn how to work with others and cooperate because you can't get through some of the obstacles that are placed in front of you with you just being an individual. You have to basically depend on your team to get through a lot, not even in just training and just that military lifestyle as a whole. Especially with my deployments in Iraq, I had to depend on the man to the left and right of me if I wanted to get through the scene of the day.
Mention kind of the tours, and we'll come on to that. How soon or how often were you boxing at this point?
It's funny. I actually before I joined the Marine Corps, which is in 03, I started boxing in 2001. I was I started boxing late. I was only 15, 16 years old at the time when I started boxing. So I had most of my amateur career picked up when I joined the All Marine Corps boxing team. So that's where most of my experience came from. And this is why I give a lot of respect to the Marine Corps because it's not all just, of course, the war and everything. There's other things you can do in the military, and boxing was something that I wanted to pick up again. And I had even going to the Olympics. A lot of people don't know because you know from like a lot when you hear a lot of good amateurs, they have usually 200, 300 fights. Like Lomachenko has like over 300 fights. I only had 90 something fights. I didn't even have 100. I didn't even crack 100 fights in the amateurs. And I was still fortunate to make it to the Olympic team. And that was duly thanks to, the training that I learned from the Marine Corps and things of that nature. And I was a quick learner. Like, I had to quickly pick up that national and international experience in terms of the amateur system. It wasn't just all local show. You have to learn how to, pretty much beat the system on a national and international level. So I had to, learn really quickly about if I wanted to succeed.
Is there a turning point? A lot of fighters I speak to, they talk about their amateur career. And I mean, Luke Campbell's one that sticks out for me. I think he lost 6 of his first 8 amateur fights. And then he said that there was one split second where he thought, okay, maybe I could do this. Was there ever a moment like that for you? Obviously, you had to learn very quickly.
It's funny that I said the same exact words as Luke. Maybe I can do it. And it's funny, it didn't really happen until I actually started winning my first few fights during the Olympic trials. That's the funny part, and that's how late it came to. Because like when I got there, I was still much heavily focused on my military career, so I wasn't really thinking too much of boxing. Even at this level, I wasn't thinking about going to the pros. I was just like, I love the sport, but do I really think I can go that far in it? Right now I'm kind of comfortable with just being in the Marine Corps. So maybe if boxing doesn't work out, okay, whatever. I still get the Marine Corps. But when I was in the Olympic trials and I started beating all these national champions, like the time, like the Pedro Sosos and the Mike Reeds and guys, I started. And it reminded you, Jose Ramirez. He was my roommate. And I met Jose Ramirez during the Olympic trial. So we were basically feeding up each other's energy. And so every time I would win, I would come to the room like, "Hey, Jose, I won." And I started thinking like, man, maybe I can, go far. Because I didn't have, same thing. I didn't have the best, at one point in time, the best win and loss ratio in the amateurs. I had a lot of wins, but I didn't have a lot of those big titles on the national level. I wasn't accustomed to fighting internationally until after I won the Olympic trials. That's what was my. It was like I said, it was like a short period that I had international experience, and that's during that same time frame. So when I started winning, that's what I'm saying to myself. You know what? Maybe I can go far with this, and do something in boxing. And that's when I started taking it more serious.
You mentioned room sharing with Jose Ramirez. Obviously, he's now a unified world champion. That must be crazy looking back. You two young kids, and now you're both world champion.
No, this is the crazy part of the division. I met and fought Josh Taylor November 2011, and it's on YouTube. You can actually look it up on YouTube. And Josh beat me by 3 points. It was a real good fight. But after that fight, me and Josh became real good friends, and that's what I love about the amateur system. Like, even though Josh was representing a whole other country from I am, boxing is still to me like a fraternity. So everybody, like, we all embrace each other, no matter where we were from. If you're a fighter, we have that respect for you. And Josh, like, that's why I still laugh and joke with Josh today. Like, oh man, like, I'm watching the fight, Josh. You got me in that last round, man. But me, like, we laugh about it. It was never been bad blood. I never forget when I got to the Olympics and I ran into Josh. And he was like, Jamel, and we just basically, embraced, like, hey man, what's up, man? And this is when Josh, like I said, me and Josh fought at junior welterweight during that time. But since in that division, the UK already had a qualified fighter. Josh had to move down to 132 pounds to make the Olympic team, and now Josh is up there at 140 as a unified champion himself. But I'm just very humbled and great to see guys that I personally know, becoming champions. So, and plus, it doesn't look too bad when you say, okay, I lost to Josh Taylor, and now he's like, the number one, junior welterweight in the world. And then, like I said, I sparred with guys like Jose, and I spar with guys like Errol Spence, but I also train now with Bud Crawford. So I have a lot of relations with a lot of all these great individuals. But that just tells you how small boxing is. But it's a great fraternity.
It really is, and what you say about kind of fighters fighters could literally meet each other for the first time if they know each other are fighters. There is always that underlying respect between them, which is what I think makes boxing such a great sport.
Right.
It's not just often people will say, how do these guys fight each other for 12 rounds, and at the end of the fight they're hugging, they're kissing, they're lifting each other up on the shoulders. Makes for such a great sport.
You can see, you can see, you've seen it yourself. You've seen a lot of build-ups, there's a lot of bad blood. But at the end of the fight, those guys, hug and embrace each other. Look at, for example, Ray Leonard and Duran. Those guys had bad blood for years, and now when you see them, you would never think they ever fought each other. Those two are like the best of friends. But that's just how boxing is.
Back to your military career, you obviously briefly touched upon the tours that you did. Something that I've heard when we've been at press conferences, and unfortunately I've not been able to speak with you. Tell me about your tours. When was your first one?
My first one was in Iraq, in Fallujah. Was really hectic at. And it's crazy. That deployment, not only did I work with a lot of other branches like the Army, but I also got to work with soldiers from the UK. So that's where, like I said, I think that's where I pick up a lot of respect for people all over, because at the same, we may have different ways of living and views, but we had a common goal. and that main goal is for everyone to get home safely to their families. So just basically communicating with troops from all over the world during that situation, it opened my eyes up to a lot of things. That's why when I even in boxing, I always share my love and respect for the UK and Irish fighting base because like I said, I've learned just to not always focus so much on just the American demographic or things like that. No, I have respect for all everyone. Like I came up watching guys like Joe Calzaghe. He fought a fellow. He beat up a fellow Olympian. That people thought that Calzaghe was going to lose to. But I wasn't so much worried about the country or race. I was more intrigued with the skill set, and that's what I respect about even with not only just the troops, but just like what they can do, to make a living or improve themselves. But I was definitely out there in Fallujah with a lot of different troops from all over the world, and then I went back to Iraq in 2005, and I did a lot of security detail, which allowed me to work with more people, with more individuals, because in order for me to survive, we had to cooperate and come together as one. So those deployments, they definitely opened me up to a lot of different view in life, I would say, and it just made me appreciate the smaller things that I have today in today's world. And that's why I think with that mentality, because I've been through so much with the military, the fighting in the ring is the easy part. That's because I use boxing it's more therapeutic. It lets me get away from the harsh realities of life at times. And boxing is just fun. That's why when you see me during the build-up, I never really bash fighters. I don't. If anything, I just stay to myself or quiet. Even if we don't sort of like get along, I don't get into the whole ugliness of it. I think it takes more of a mental toughness to ignore certain things and to go on and still go in there and take care of business.
Now, I've got an awful lot of friends who have been in the army or who are in the army, and around that kind of time of Iraq and slightly later in Afghanistan, they were deployed as well, and they went out and they served. What's your overall thought on the British squaddies?
Oh man, to me, this is why I love the UK, and I always said I want to go back to London because I wasn't in the London games as well, as we know. But like I looked at it like this, like a lot of those guys, they were no different from Americans. That's how I looked at it. Like, and it was a lot easier to vibe and connect with them because we all speak English. So that was the so the language barrier wasn't an issue. But we may use different terms and analogies at times, but like at the same time, like that's when you realize people are just people. They may live a different way, but people are people. But I enjoyed it. We actually had a blast dealing with the United Kingdom troops and things of that and people of that nature because, like I said, we all had one common goal. But like I said, we like when we got together, we made the most of it because at the same time, you need to keep your mind off the harsh realities of war. So you want to bond and connect with others. And you may share similar stories. And this is another story too. Just even with boxing, I actually shared in 2011 in Azerbaijan. The American team shared the same hallway in the hotel with the UK team, but we didn't look at it as competition, like because we were all there and we were just trying to like keep in touch with the outside world because we trying to look for Wi-Fi and things like that. But like I personally know a lot of the UK fighters at the time from that era, but we actually got along real well. Even if we had to compete with each other, like we didn't hold any grudges. We look at it; it's a sport, it's a competitive sport, but it's a sport nonetheless. Like I said, I have a lot of good fond memories with the UK team and things of that nature. But like for me, like I said, I look at it like this: we all breathe the same air. So if you give me that same respect, I'll give it back to you. And that's just the way how I live life. That's what I teach my children. I don't care about what religion you serve or the race you are. I mean, if you show mutual respect as a human being, we can get along just as fine.
How do you prepare for war, Jamel? I mean, I appreciate that's a very ambiguous question, and how is it different in your head before you've gone and when you actually get there and you're there? How is it different?
Okay, when I first went, I was about 19 years old, so I was still a teenager and a kid, and at the time, I was like how you looked at it. I looked at it. I seen it as the movies. That's all I knew at the time before I went. But you know, when I got there, I started looking at the harsh realities of war and how people lived. And you know, I had to change my whole mindset because I was still kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I was still kind of like immature because I didn't have no kids. I didn't have, you know, I didn't have a wife or, you know, things like that at home. I mean, of course, my parents were concerned, but at that point in time, I looked at it as, if I see tomorrow, that's good. If not, then so be it. I had that type of attitude. But it wasn't until my second deployment I had more. I was more mature. I was expecting my first son like during that time. So, you know, while I was in Iraq, my son was on the way of being born. You know, months down the road. So I had to change my mindset how I did things from 2 years ago to then, and you know, I just started taking things a lot more serious. You know, I had something to really fight for and go home to at this point in time. So I definitely have to change my mindset, and I think that's why I say, like, even when I tell people all the time, even with boxing, like, you know, there's nothing that boxing can do to me, like, painfully, that I haven't been through in life, because they say boxing is what, 80% mental, 20% physical, and in a mental aspect, I've been through the worst of the worst. But like, to prepare for war, I just had to you know, I always thought about the people that look up to me, or the people who depended on me. So that was my main motivation each day in Iraq.
Final question, really, and feel free to speak as openly or not on this question
Okay.
as you'd like. I had a friend who went to Iraq and Afghanistan. When he came back from Afghanistan, something changed in him, and he unfortunately developed serious alcohol and drug issues later on in his life, and it really did affect him. And he was from a very good home, he was from a very well-to-do family, as we would say over here. But unfortunately, the experience that he had when he was deployed really affected him. Now, obviously, I can see from yourself. I mean, you have a very successful career. You have a lovely family. I'm sure that it's not always necessarily been that way. But how did it affect you? And as I say, feel free to speak as
No,
openly or as
I'm
not
glad
about that.
because I love this the part that I want to get out to people anyway. You know, from my second employment, my family noticed the changes in me because, you know, me at the time, I'm thinking as, I gotta be tough, I gotta be gritty. This is what war is about. If you're soft, you'll never make it. But I developed PTSD. To even now, I have PTSD, but as ways that I cope with it. I developed alcohol problems at one point in time. That's why when I heard Tyson Fury's story, it opened my eyes because I started seeing that, okay, it's just not military personnel that develop these issues of depression and stress and things of that nature. And Tyson Fury's story actually motivated me to open more about my story. So, you know, when you were speaking about your friend, it's a lot of it sounds similar to what I was going through. The only thing, you know, that I wasn't doing was, of course, the you know, the drugs and issues and that, but I was definitely heavy with alcohol, and it's crazy. Even in my amateur career, going to the Olympics, I was heavy on alcohol. You know, going, you know, like on the weekend, like I would train hard during the week, but the weekends would come, and I would just drink heavily because I had. But when you find yourself in a dark situation and you have nothing but time, you find ways, you know, to try to, you know, take your mind off of things and escape for, as I may say, in your mindset for a while. And alcohol was my way of escaping at times. But you know, when I started getting bad with my attitude, like I said, my attitude started changing, my personality. I was being to myself. I didn't want to be around people. That's when I knew it was time for me to really get some help. And you know, I was man enough to go out there and to find help. You know, and now I'm clean, of course. I'm a better person. Even in my 30s, like I said, it's amazing how I can still manage to keep my weight down and get down to like the weight classes you think that these younger guys are at, and still be impressive at the weight. But that all comes to basically how I changed my lifestyle up outside of the ring. Because like I said, there's a lot of things that people don't see. Of course, the fans, they see what you can do on TV, but they don't know the battles you go through outside of the ring and outside of the gym. But yeah, like I definitely. So now when I have time, I always try and find time to travel to speak with veterans from all over, just to share my story and let them know that, you know, it's not over until you decide it's over with. You know, until you decide it's over. you can come being from the bottom and still rise to the top. Because I'm living proof. I've been at my worst. I've had my downfalls in my career. I had my downfalls outside the ring, and yet here I am, potentially one of the best super featherweights in the world now. And but at the end of the day, I'm just humbled and grateful because it just shows my character. And I'm a true champion outside the ring as well as I am inside the ring.
How much does that mean to you? Because as I say, I have heard you speak about it, and you do speak with such a passion, and there's such a candor to the way that you talk about your time in the military that really is appealing. How much does that mean to you to be able to give that back? Because of course, men in general, but particularly military men or tough guys, so to speak, they do struggle to open up and talk about these issues. And you're living proof that you can come from the other side. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot because, like, saying the same thing like as you, I have friends in the military, of course, obviously. But I've had friends that I lost because of these same situations. So, even now, just talking about it and thinking about it, I still see those faces of those friends that I came up with that aren't here today. So it means a lot for me to talk about it because can potentially save someone else's life just opening up about my story. And then they feel comfortable not only getting help, but opening up about their story as well. And I've seen that for me at least. When you open up, it makes it a lot easier to deal with the situation because now that you're speaking about it, you actually see the problem, and then it makes you want to go get help to fix the problem. Especially when you have people who care about you that want to see you get better. It really motivates you to get out there and do something about it. But definitely, like I said, the military experience, of course, it had my ups and downs, but here I am now. I'm healthy, I'm good. And I'm just honored that I can share my story, as not only as a champion, but just a normal human being as the next man. And I give thanks to boxing because I feel that boxing gave me a bigger platform now to share that story and to connect with more people out there.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, and it is something that a lot of fighters do, and credit to fighters such as yourself who do use their platform to really engage with fans who might be going through the same thing. So credit to you for that. Boxing, how big of a sport was boxing to you? Were there other sports? Were you always a boxing fan?
I think I was always a boxing fan because boxing is generation after generation after generation. So boxing has always been there from the time I can remember. But of course, yeah, I've been a fan of other sports, of course. But boxing to me is probably the other than maybe football or soccer as we call it over here. Boxing is probably the first international sport that I came across because boxing is worldwide. So that and then as I got older, when I started getting into boxing myself, I started studying more of not just American fighters, but just respecting the craft of other different styles and fighters from all over the globe as well. So boxing to me is probably the main. If y'all think about it now, it's probably the main global sport that I love. So boxing definitely appreciative of boxing for sure.
You mentioned earlier on Joe Calzaghe, and you've kind of spoken about other fighters around the world. What fighters did you watch when you were first getting into sport?
I remember, like I said, early stages before I started boxing. Prince Nassim. That's us. And he stood out to me as a kid mainly because of his entrances and the way he showed out in the ring. But he was definitely probably to me one of the best showmen of the sport in that time. Then of course you start looking at the Mexican fight base, and to this day Eric Morales is one of my favorite fighters. Juan Manuel Marquez is another one. Then, of course, you got to respect the guys like Pacquiao and, people forget about the guys like Chris John that came from Indonesia. So there's a lot. When you speak boxing, I don't just focus on of course, the obvious like the Ali's and the Ray Robinsons and guys like that and the Mike Tysons. No, I was a huge fan of guys like Lennox Lewis, and because of Lennox, I like Lennox because Lennox wasn't like a crafty, slick boxer, but he was sharp and he was very fundamental, and he's become to me one of the best heavyweights of all time. And like I said, he didn't go out there. He wasn't a Floyd Mayweather with the most craftiest defense. He wasn't a Tyson with the biggest punch, but he was an all around fighter and he went on to win. Yeah, he's mentally tough, and he went on to win great things in his career.
You mentioned Nassim Hamed. It's interesting you'd say that because obviously you're from New York. Arguably his most famous fight, or certainly most famous win, was against a fellow New Yorker in Kevin Kelly. You've got very similar speech patterns. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's funny. I because of my similarities, I got to know Kevin Kelly and his family. So me and Kevin, we do speak a lot throughout the years. But yeah, man, that just goes to show you, man. I just respect fighters for what they do overall. Like, I mean, yes, Kevin Kelly was a fellow New Yorker as well, but I love what the Prince did, and I actually get into arguments over the Prince because when people bring up the Prince, they always bring up that one loss. They forget. They don't take time to actually look at his fights and look into his career. He wanted those other big fights, but those other big names, they didn't want to fight him because the Prince was so unpredictable and he can hit. So that's why I hate when people think, oh, he was overrated because when he fought somebody, no, the Prince has a lot of great fights. You guys just haven't dug into it. And just outside of the ring, he called for those guys. He called for the Moraleses and the guys of this era at the time. None of those guys wanted to fight him. So, but like I said, Prince Nassim is one of my favorites growing up. And there are many others that I can't think of now. But I was actually a fan of Ricky Hatton. Because Ricky Hatton wasn't the greatest technician, but Ricky Hatton was tough. Ricky Hatton made even the Floyd fight tough in the early stages. So but like fighters like that, I always pick up something from those fighters, and I try to put it in my own arsenal. Like today, Winky Wright is one of my favorite fighters too. Southpaw, he wasn't the most flashy, but Winky Wright had the basics down pat. And he went on to do great things and was undisputed champion at one point in time. So
yeah, Winky Wright would have been a tough out for anyone at 154, 160.
Yeah,
certainly 154, but yeah. When people look, you make it.
He gave Mantilla a tough one at 160, so he was actually, he could have been the first fighter, I believe, at the time to be undisputed in 2 weight classes with all the belts, which he with 54, and if he would have beat Jamel, he would have been undisputed at 60 as well at the same time.
Yeah, he's a tremendously underrated fighter, Winky Wright.
He went to Europe for a long time to get a lot of fights.
Yeah.
He couldn't even get the big names in America. So that's why I respect the European base as well, because, like I said, they take boxing just as serious as we take it, if not more.
It's interesting you'd said about Nassim Hamed as well, and he had this one loss. He had one loss to a first ballot Hall of Famer, and apparently he's overrated.
I don't get that. I don't like that. I hate that.
It's interesting you were talking about Kevin Kelly as well. I actually caught up with Kevin when I was in Vegas last. Kevin can talk.
Yes, he can. I know. If I get Kevin on the phone right now, Kevin will keep me on the phone for hours. That's why I have to watch when I call Kevin.
Make sure you've got a spare hour.
Right.
Talk to me about your professional career. Was it always the plan? I mean, you've mentioned kind of you didn't always prioritise boxing because of your military career. When did you think, okay, I could do this professionally? Not that, okay, I might be good as an amateur, but when was professional boxing ever realistic for you?
I think professional boxing became a thing that I thought I could do when I qualified for the Olympics. It was never my goal, or my first goal at least, to become a world champion. My thing was, I just wanted to basically live a peaceful life and just be a provider for my family. And the military was actually the easier of the two, because it was basically a guaranteed set pay that I was going to make, so I could take to provide for my family. But it wasn't until when I qualified for the Olympics and I said, maybe I can go to further lengths in boxing. So, and we all know boxing is a small window you can do this. So I had to jump at the opportunity because I knew that the military would always be there, but boxing is a small window you could be successful at it. So I jumped at that.
Your Olympic experience, a lot of people have differing experiences at the Olympics, and it's not always relative to how well they do either. Sometimes it can be very, very different to people for a number of reasons. What was your Olympic experience like? Like
you point out, even though I lost my first fight in the Olympics, the first round of the tournament, I still actually had a blast. I actually had a great time because I was the team captain, of course, but I actually got to mingle and get to know other nations' talents. Not even just in boxing. I got to meet other like swimmers and runners and from other countries and just share our stories, share my stories with them and listen to their stories and how they got to where they were at and explain how I got to where I'm at the time. So I had a blast. Like I think the Olympics is probably the greatest atmosphere in my boxing career that I've ever been to. And that's why I was telling myself that I wanted to fight in the UK because like I watch like especially when I watched my Olympic teammate Earl when he fought Cal Brook. Even people probably slightly would have had Cal Brook the underdog because it's a Golovkin fight prior before. Cal Brook was still able to bring such a massive crowd and his followers and supporters, they rolled with Kel all the way to the end. And like when I seen that, that's why I said that's what I want to do. One day I want to have a world title fight in the UK somewhere because even if the guys are rooting against me, they respect boxing and I just want to be a part of that atmosphere. And like not every world champion can say they was a part of that atmosphere. We've come across world champions history that still were fighting on smaller local scenes because they didn't get those big fights. So I told myself, if I ever got an opportunity to fight in Ireland or the UK, I want to do it. I don't care if I'm going in as the guest or whatever. I want to do that because that's I just want to be a part of something big.
You mentioned Errol Spence, obviously being your Olympic teammate and somebody that you know well. I spoke to kind of, I wouldn't call them boxing insiders, but people who were familiar with Errol as an amateur and people who were familiar with him coming through, and they all told me at the time that this kid is going to be a star. He's going to be a great fighter. Did you know that then?
Yeah. I knew that mainly through his the way he worked. He took everything in everyday serious. Like he was hungry. He was hungry. And Earl has always been he's been a dog in the gym. He's always been a dog. So I knew out of the talent, I knew him. I would say him and Jose Ramirez are probably the top two on my Olympic team. And that's just me being honest. I'm not even I'm not even putting myself in the category because I was still basically the newcomer on that type of level. But him and Jose were very hard workers, and I knew they were going to be something special when their time came.
Now, obviously, I'm not going to put you on the spot because you train with Terence and you know Errol very well. But how great a fight is that, and how much does boxing need that fight?
I want to see it as a fan because I'm a fan of boxing before I'm a fighter. I always say that. So like I said, I love them both. They're both great individuals. I think that's to me a 50-50 fight, and I say that because I think whoever brings the right mindset into that fight will come on top because they both have great attributes and things of that nature. But I think with those two, it all comes down who wants it the most. So I definitely want to see it. Like it's funny because of course I train and speak with Bud all the time, but I still to this day speak with Earl as well. I check in with him, see how he's doing. His family loves me because his mother is from Long Island, where I'm from. So that's how we easily connect. Because Earl, people don't know, but Earl was also born in New York. He just moved to Dallas at a young age, but he has a lot of family where I'm from. So that's how we connect. But like I said, as a fan, I want to see the fight. At the end of the day, I just hope they can just be sportsmen about it, and go on their separate ways afterwards.
What's Terence like away from the cameras? Obviously, he comes across as quite a measured young man. He's not a Conor McGregor, Tyson Fury on the microphone. What's he like away from the cameras? What's Terence really like?
That guy, I'm telling you right now, that guy is the biggest class clown that you can think of, and that's the funny part. People like to say, you look at Terence on TV or in interviews, everything is serious, but he is very competitive and wants to play all the time. Like this time, I gotta tell him, like, "Hey man, just leave me alone," like, because he wants to challenge you at everything. He's very competitive. He wants to play you and everything from Call of Duty on Xbox or whatever. Or he's very competitive at everything. That's just him. But he's like one of the most humble dudes. Like if you know him personally, he's one of the most humble guys out there. Like he really takes care of his people. He takes care of his community. He loves his community. And like I said, and more importantly, he's more of a family man. He spends a lot of his time with his kids and his family. So that's what he enjoys to do. He's not really let's say like my other friend, like Adrian Broner. He's like the total opposite. Like AB loves the spotlight and like loves to hang out and things of that nature, which is cool. But Bud, he's more quiet. He rather go fishing than to the club. He'll choose fishing over the club anytime. And he just loves seeing his family and especially his children happy.
Final one on kind of the whole Terence and Terence Crawford really. You train with Bomac. Obviously, Bomac has sort of gathered himself a really growing reputation in more of the public eye, I would say, of recent times. Obviously, his work with Terence and yourself. What's it like working with Bomac, and how do you feel that he's improved your game?
Man, I give all the credit in the world to Bomac. Not just him. Because, we actually have where we had three basically head trainers, which is uncommon, which is very uncommon in boxing at least. So this is Bomac, there's Red Spikes, there's Isao Dieguez. So it's crazy. Bomac's from Omaha, Red is from Chicago, and then Isao, he's from Guadalajara. But it's like the chemistry. We all mend together very well, and like I said. Even when at my lowest point in my career, I went to those guys, and those guys brought me up to where I had, my best performance against a very aggressive and tough Masaki Ito. So I give all my credit to them. Even Bud is, he's basically like a fourth trainer in my corner. And the one thing I love about that camp is nobody is bigger than the other guy next to him. Bud, when it's my camp, Bud gives me that same respect. Even when we share camps, we never look at it as who's the biggest star in this camp. No, we all get along very well in that camp. And I'm actually going out there next month next week to start training with them again to get back into the mix of things. But I'm looking forward to it. But we have a great time together, and I love them. Like they're all considered family.
How beneficial is it for you as a fellow fighter and fellow world champion to have somebody like Terence Crawford, who is regarded by many as one of the pound for pound stars? How beneficial is that?
That's no brainer. That's a huge advantage in any fight. I mean, especially when you have the opportunity to basically get in there and like do sparring sessions, but one of the best fighters in the world today. That's a huge honor, and it definitely helps a lot mentally because it's like you look at it like this. Okay, I hung in there with 12 rounds with Terence Crawford in sparring. Even though it's sparring, Terence does not take it easy on anybody. I know I can get through this fight with this person when it comes down to it. And that's how I look at it mentally.
Okay, right. We've gone all of this way so far without talking about Carl Frampton. So let's talk about Carl Frampton. Having known Carl fairly well for a few years, and this short interview that we've done now, you're quite similar people. You're both very down to earth. You're both very pleasant, family men. It's almost a shame that eventually you're going to have to punch each other in the face.
Yeah, but that's just a sport. It's crazy. I was actually a fan. Well, I am a fan of Carl Frampton's long before I even thought of a fight with Carl Frampton. Because remember, I was coming out from as a pro, close to 140, 135, most of my pro career, and now I'm at 130. And Carl was at 122, 26, and now he's just getting to it. So it's just crazy how those our two worlds, got together, but that's just boxing. But like I said, where people always bring the whole thing, the size advantage and the reach and the height. I always, be humble and say this. I always say that where I may beat Carl at in terms of physicality and things of that nature, Carl beats me in the experience because he's been in the more high-profile fights. Carl Frampton is actually my first. If you look at it, I'm being honest, he's my first real high-profile fight to come up. But like I said, it's never any bad blood. If you see it, we'll probably joke at each other on Twitter every now and then. But even I have fun with Frank Warren at times. Me and Frank Warren started following each other just off our little back and forth little pander. But yeah, but like I say, it's kind of sad because at the end of the day, because I don't want to see where he doesn't go home to his family the way he left them. And I'm pretty sure he feels the same about me. But it's just sometimes because we know boxing can sometimes get very brutal, But overall, when it's all said and done, I just want him to go back to his lovely family, back in one piece, because he's not only your husband, he's a father, just such as I am. But like I said, it's actually good for boxing when you actually do get to see two good gentlemen come together to make a big fight and not have to get ugly doing it.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that, don't get me wrong, we all like a little bit of spice, but I think when it's completely manufactured and fake, I don't think it does the sport any favours. So I completely agree with you.
I always said to myself, it doesn't feel natural when you have to force it. You have to basically play the bad guy. The fans are not stupid. They can see right through it. So I just said, during this whole time, I'm just gonna be myself, and I've seen that Carl's himself too. Yes, Carl has said things that maybe that he can exploit to my game, but I haven't said that because in my boxing, the way I look at it, I'm not gonna tell you your weaknesses because then you're gonna go to the gym and study and focus on it. So I'm actually glad that Carl, in his opinion, exploited some of my weaknesses, but I just because it makes tells me now I know what to look out for when it comes to my training. But other than that, that's probably only maybe negative talk that we had. But other than when we spoke face to face a few weeks ago with Christina Poncher, it was we mainly spoke about family and everything, and we had similar ways of life living. But like I said, at the end of the day, I'm just happy that the people are going to still get to see a good fight between two good gentlemen. And like I said, I wish Carl all the best in the world. In my opinion, I think he will go down as a Hall of Famer, either win or lose, because you can't. It's hard to take away from a guy who was once the fighter of the year. So I give Carl all the respect in the world.
Again, I think that's very well said. I spoke to Bob, as I said before I jumped on this call, Bob Arum, your promoter and Carl's promoter. He said that it's looking likely that Carl is going to have an in-between fight at home, potentially something for yourself. Obviously, don't tell anybody yet. But it may seem that
at the phone call I just got right before I got on the call with you from Bomac at least. Bomac told me, "Oh yeah, Bob wanted me to tell you," but like I said, that's why I was kind of I'm not upset because at the end of the day, me and Carl still want to fight, so it's not like a thing where we see in boxing where something goes wrong and then people go fight go a separate way and then they never get back to the fight they were supposed to have. So no, the people want to see the fight. I'm definitely open to it. Like I said, with Carl, it would definitely be a huge name on my resume, and I'll be honored to share the ring with him. But the only thing, like you pointed out earlier in the conversation, that now the location may change because I know, like Carl was saying, also the weather gets real cold towards the end of the year in Belfast, so you definitely can't have it outdoors and things of that nature. But he also was open-minded to have it in that Madison Square Garden. He's never headlined there. My dream as a New Yorker is to headline there. So, you know what I mean? Like, as long as I have a dance partner like Carl who wants to do the fight would definitely still always be on the table.
Yeah, and Carl's boxed in New York before. He didn't box at MSG, boxed at Barclays.
Leo Santa Cruz at the Barclays Center.
Yeah, and the Irish will come out in New York as well to support.
Yeah, and that's why I actually wanted to have it in New York in the beginning of the talk. But when they told me that about Belfast, I wasn't against it. I was like, oh, okay, that'd be a huge honor for me to travel overseas to have a big fight and do something. And I can say I've gotten a lot of love and respect from not only the Irish but the UK fans as well, and they were more than ready to welcome me to come out there. But it's kind of like I said, now it's kind of sad that we got to put things on hold, and now the whole location might change. But like you pointed out, they will come because I was actually at the Joshua Ruiz fight in the Garden, and that's what made me say like, man, I got to fight here against one of these guys from over in the UK or somewhere because they really come out like Katie Taylor. The Irish fans really came heavy for her. Joshua had the whole UK came out there for him. So either way, wherever the fight is at, I know the Irishmen and the UK fans will definitely come.
Yeah, it's not as bad as like Vegas. Vegas is like a 10, 11 hour flight for us, whereas New York's
exactly. That's why it makes it easier to come from one coast to the next, and it's right there. So I'd rather have them come make a shorter trip to New York than having to go to like a Vegas.
I think, you mentioned that you wanted to fight in the UK and you really loved atmospheres. it would be a crying shame if you didn't get to box Carl Frampton in Belfast, because Belfast atmosphere. I was over and watched Carl against Luke Jackson, and the atmosphere is something else. So maybe if you have the fight in New York, it could be a fight of the year, and you could do the rematch in Belfast.
I gave him that. I guess that's the thing we spoke about with Christina. I said, depending how great the fight is, the first fight, why not we do it again? I brought that up, and I'm not shy from that idea. I'm not shy from that idea at all.
I believe you. I believe that you'd travel.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, Jamel, this has been a real pleasure speaking to you. I'm glad that we did this, albeit under slightly different circumstances than would have been ideal, but that's fine. I've taken up enough of your time, sir, so I'm sure that you've got more classes to teach and games to play. But thanks very much for your time. If you have any final words, please say them now.
Oh man, like I said, man, it was great speaking with you, man. Like the conversation just flows so naturally, like we know each other for years. So that's what I love about these things. I just want to say I love and respect everyone over there on that end as well. If anybody wants to reach out to me in terms of the fans, you can contact me on Instagram or on Twitter at Jamel Herring. As you know, I interact with a lot of my fan base out there, whether they're with me or against me, because like I said, I won over plenty of Belfast fans now just from basically having a regular conversation with them, and they just respect the man that I am. And like I said, I respect that you root for Carl. I'm not against that, but I also respect that you give me the same respect as a human being in return. So definitely I have a lot of love for guys out there like that. But like I said, anytime you want to talk, also man, just reach out to me. We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Jamel, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. If not in the UK, then probably more likely in America sometime.
Okay.
Thanks very much, champ.
Take care, man.
Thanks, man.